Hey everybody, what's up? Fuller here. Thanks so much for checking out the channel. In today's video, I'm going to do a full walkthrough of the blueprints and the Metasounds for the musical ball drop program that I made, that I put a teaser out for about a week ago, and it looks a little bit something like this. So when we hit play, we hear this musical pad spawn and the quartz clock starts. And then over here you can see the quartz clock ticking. I left that in there just so you could see it. And when you click the M button on your keyboard, it starts spawning these musical balls. Each of these balls triggers a sine wave note that's in the same key as the main track. And it's really cool, and it looks a little something like this. So you see that these balls, every time they're triggered, they play a random note in an array, but then if they hit something else, they play another note, and if they hit each other, they both play a note. So you get these chords and these harmonies all in a major key. And then also when they hit each other, they change colors. And then over here, you've got the instruments. When you press that, it starts the kick drum pattern. Then over here it starts the bass line, which is modeled after the TD3, the Roland TB303 clone. Pretty cool. If you are listening through a laptop or a monitor, you might not hear that. You may want to put on some headphones. It's kind of in the lower register. Over here, this triggers a random melody. Super cool. And then this harmonizes this melody. Pretty stinking cool, isn't it? And then you can continue to generate these spheres. You can mute each one of these, and it stops spinning. Pretty cool, isn't it? I will say that this is actually highly addictive. Matter of fact, I think I may actually make the game available so you can just download it and play it on PC if you want. It's kind of therapeutic. I've been kind of playing in it and getting lost in it, and it's been pretty fun. So now, I will say this. This is probably one of the most complicated things that I've made in the realm of the Metasound world. So if I did a full build on this video would be like 3 hours long. I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is I'm going to walk through all aspects of this in case you want to build something like it yourself. Okay, so let's jump on in. So here we are in the Unreal Engine. We're in Unreal Engine 5. And the scripting of this is fairly complex, but the actual elements themselves are fairly simple. So what we're doing here, here's our main level. We're using the third person blueprint to do a few things, and I'll show you this in a second. I've tried to organize the blueprints and the Metasound graphs as clean as possible so that they make a little sense. Let me just kind of zoom out on all of the things that we've used. And yeah, I think we're good here. Let me move this over. Okay. So let's start with the layout. So as far as inside the game, aside from the cool lighting and the materials, we have 4 basic boxes. We have this box, this box, this box, and this box. And those are just blueprints. Okay, and we'll look at those in a second. I have this Metasound repeater, I called it, and then I have this Metasound synth drop. So both these Metasounds are inside the game, and that's important. So let's kind of break this down. So what happens is, when you click on this box, it starts the kick drum. When you click on this, it starts the bass, melody, and harmony. And then the ball drops actually have their own Metasounds built in as well. So let's start by just looking at the level blueprint. So let's go to the third person map, level blueprint. And let's look and see what I have here. I have 4 main things happening here, okay? And let me zoom in so you can see this well. The first one is mouse interaction. Because our mouse clicks on stuff, I wanted you to be able to see the mouse right away. So on event begin play, we're setting the able to click events, mouse events, and the show mouse cursor. I'm not sure if you actually need the click events. I think it does that automatically in the main action steps, but I did it anyways just to be sure. But you do want to use these so you can show the cursor on it. So that's what that looks like. I did this in some other videos as well if you want to build that step by step. Here I have a line trace. In this video we're not actually using the line trace, but we will use the line trace later when I implement some fader knobs and some volume knobs. So that's there, and it's been in some of my other videos as well, and I left it there because I'm using this as a template, but you don't need that. Okay, now here is where the cubes are. So inside this blueprint, you've got icon 3, 2, 1, and 4 because I added that one last and I didn't bother to change it. And you'll see here icon 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is the exact same logic for each one, which is why it looks so symmetrical. But basically what we have happening is when you click on, and this is just the animation basically, when you click on the box, the cube with the drum symbol or something on it, it flip-flops. When you click on it the first time, it spawns the explosion, okay, at the location of the box. So that's where you get this boom. That's what's happening right there. And that's not critical, I just think it looks cool. So that's all we're doing there. We're just spawning that explosion. And the reason I put a flip-flop there is because the second time I click on it, it turns it off. I don't want an explosion there. I only want the explosion when it turns it on, which is why we're using a flip-flop, which is a very important node. This is where we're actually spawning the balls. So when we click the M, we're spawning those balls randomly. So what we're doing here is when we press the letter M, and this can be any letter really, but I just like M, what it does is the first thing we do is we set the value of a variable. And what this is, we're setting this variable called spawn transform. That's what we're doing. We're setting spawn transform is what we're doing. And we've split those struct pins out so we get all of the nice detailed spawning information. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to use that location later. And what we're doing is we're spawning anywhere on the x-axis between 1500 and 1800, y 1400 and 1800, and z 200 and 700. Then we're also scaling it because I want it to be different sizes, not all the same sizes. So every time it spawns, it's going to scale it between half and 2 times the size of the actual sphere. And then what we're doing, so that's the spawn transform. All that information is stored here. Then what we're doing is we are spawning BP note drop. And so let's just take a look over here at BP note drop, which is right here. In our BP note drop, we have a sphere, just a static mesh here, and then we have a collision sphere also. And that's what's going to detect. Now, I could have made this a little smaller and make it more accurate, but it is what it is. That's what we've got there. So those are spawning and dropping out of the sky, and every time they hit something, we get information. On the event graph of the BP note drop, all we have here is a material switch. On begin overlap, so anytime it hits something, we're going to call trigger note drop, okay? So we're going to send, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to send this. This is important. We are sending out this event dispatcher. Trigger note drop. I have a video on event dispatchers if you want to learn how to use those more in depth, but for now just know that's an event dispatcher, and that's calling it, broadcasting it to the rest of the game, and you'll see how we pull that in a minute. So we're triggering note drop, so we're going to use that action later. Then we are also flip-flopping from gold to chrome. And basically every time it hits something, if it's gold, it's going to switch to chrome. If it's chrome, it's going to switch to gold. And so where you see that happen is when it hits the other ball. See how that turned to chrome? And then that chrome, and that chrome, chrome, chrome. And then every time they hit each other, they flip-flop back. Okay? That's it for the BP note drop. Now, after we spawn it, we are setting a variable called note dropped, okay? This note drop is now, we're going to bind the event to trigger note drop. So now from the third person, remember here over in the note drop when we're sending this event dispatcher note drop? So over here in the level blueprint, we're picking that event up. So we're binding the note drop event to this action. When we get that note drop event, wherever it comes from, we're going to play. We're going to do this custom event, and we're going to play. I have a print string here, and we're also going to play the Metasound here. What Metasound? This Metasound synth drop, which is in, remember, this is in the original level over here. This is the Metasound synth drop. And when the level spawns, it automatically plays, and that's important. Let's look at this Metasound synth drop real quick. So if you see over here, it's the play node isn't hooked up to anything because I want the Metasound playing so that I can access these other triggers in real time. So the Metasound's already queued. All we got to do is trigger that. And then so you'll see here, this trigger is called ball 1. Let's look back over here to the third person map. When this event, this trigger note drop happens, when that happens, it is playing the note drop in this sound, the synth drop, and it's playing executing trigger parameter ball 1. So it's actually the same. So when I hit play here, it'd be the same as me pressing this button. Okay, so that's how the balls are triggering it. And then also one other thing, after this ball spawns, oh, and by the way, we're binding this event to this note drop. So which is basically whichever ball is spawned, we're binding that event to. So we're listening for that event. Then over here, we're spawning this emitter, the explosion. So when you go in there, it's just explodes. Every time you spawn, it explodes with a little fire, which is always cool. Who doesn't love fire explosions? That's it for the third person map. Now let's look at, we looked at the note drop. Now let's look at the synth drop Metasound in detail. What we have here, so every time the ball drop, it plays a note from the synthesizer inside the Unreal Engine. If you don't know about the synthesizer, go check out my videos on the Metasound Synthesis 101. I walk through the whole process on how to generate sounds and create envelopes with the synthesizer, which is really awesome because we can do a lot of generative music here now. So let's look at what I've got going. Now, I didn't want it to trigger one note from the same synth every time. So what I wanted to do, because I knew there'd be many opportunities for multiple balls spawning at the same time, I wanted to do basically a sequence of 3 notes. So you're playing 3 different voices, and then the fourth voice starts playing on the first synth again. And so you might get a little, if you had a little glide in here like I do, if the first note and the fourth note play quickly together, you'll hear a little glide. But I didn't want it to be chaotic, so it's basically like ball drop, ball drop, ball drop, and then it loops. So you hear a little glide there. Now what we're doing is here, every time we trigger in ball 1, it goes out the sequence in order. Metasound sequencer. The first time it goes to note 1. And what we do is we generate a random float between 60 and 65, which is C to F. Really small note range, but it gives it that kind of inspirational vibe. Then over here, we're quantizing this to the major scale, so it won't ever be chromatic. It'll be C, D, E, or F. Then we're coming over here, we're pitching it up plus 12, an octave, because we want that to octave higher. Then we're converting that to a frequency, which is playing the sine wave. Then also at the same time, we're triggering this envelope, which has a fairly quick attack and a fairly, half-second delay. And then all that's going into the mixer. We're running that through a little bit of stereo delay and then out. And then each of these voices go through this delay. This voice for note 2 is identical to note 1. However, when you get down here, oh no, correction. No, I lied. And here's another reason I split them up. So note 1 is between C and F, which is 60 and 65. Note 2 is an octave lower, C. So Sorry, forgive me for the out-of-tune piano in my studio. It's my grandma's 1958 Wurlitzer. Bless her soul. And then we've got almost an octave, actually over an octave here, 48 to 57, or actually just under an octave, 48 to 57. Again, quantizing to the major scale. And then note 3, so my voice is cracking. Note 3 is going to give us the full octave from low C to high C, and 48 to 60. It's also quantized to the major scale, and it's in that same octave range. So that's going to play all of these notes. And then what's cool is when some of them bump in together, they'll play them at the same time, but they'll be harmonized, which is pretty cool. Sometimes they'll be unison, but sometimes they'll be harmonized. So that kind of summarizes the note drop and then the Metasound synth drop. Now, let's look at this Metasound repeater. So in here I mentioned we pull in this BP Meta repeater. What is the Meta repeater? Well, let's look at it. I've got 5 basic things happening here. Over here I have the quartz clock set up, and I trigger pads. So if you see at the beginning of the game, is first time you hit play, you hear that nice warm ambient pad. That's a pad I created. I do sound design, I do pads, and I've created a lot of pads over the last 10 years. And I think pads are just like a great, it's just a tonic bed, just kind of creating some ambience, which allows us to build on top of that. So that triggers that in the key of C. So what we have is we have the quartz clock set up on begin play, and then over here we're setting the tempo, we're setting we're starting the clock, and then we're subscribing to the quantize event on the beat. Now, I have a whole video series on quartz clock if you want to go check that out. Then I also play the pads, right? So I start the quartz clock and play the pads. That's why you see this clock ticking and you hear the pads. Now, before I go over to the bind event from the cubes, I want to look down here. From the subscription of the quantize event on beat, come down here, and then I've got this quartz beat event and transport reset. Now this is important. So we've got this custom event here called beat quantize, and we're doing a couple things with it. One, I'm printing the bar and beats, right? So I've got this pen string here, and I'm printing it on every bar and every beat. I am printing what bar and what beat we're at. That's just for visual feedback, so you can see up here, it's printing that on every beat. So you know that beat quantize is working. Then over here, we are resetting the transport on a quantization on the bar, transport relative, and we are setting it every 2 bars. So you'll see this is going to count up to right before bar 3, and it's going to reset itself. So this is basically a 2-bar loop, and that's what we're doing here. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here off the beat quantize event, and we are going to pull out this logic for the rhythm. And so what we're going to say is every time that our bar number hits 2, we want to do this thing. What do we want to do? Well, the first time we want to do once execute the start melody. And what this is going to do is this is going to start that MS sampler melody, which is going to start the here, let me just play it here. We're going to start the melody at 0, the harmony at 0, and together they sound cool. And it's also going to be playing the percussion track and the bass. Now, all of this is going to be at 0, so you're not going to hear it. But we do want to start it. That way everything stays up in perfect sync. The second time this hits bar 2, now this is a do once, so that's only going to start at 1 time. So every other time that the measure hits 2, we're going to do this thing. And what this thing is, we are setting the beat parameter of the Metasound sampler, which is, if you look up here, this is the input beat. And so what this is doing is this is changing the beat multiplier on this node. So it's changing it. 1 is quarter note, 0.5 is a eighth note, 2 is a half note, etc. So what this is doing is every 2 bars, it is randomly generating from this variable array, and let me pull this out, between a eighth note, or eighth note, quarter note, eighth note, quarter note, and then a half note. And then I put those in there because I wanted them to trigger that sort of weight. So that's basically changing the melody so that the rhythm of the melody, so that we don't get bored with the same rhythm, but it changes every 2 bars. Not too often that it's distracting, but often enough to where it seems fresh and new. So that's a big part of that. And then let's go over up here. This is the final thing on the BPM Meta, the Blueprint Meta repeater. What this is we're just basically event binding from the cubes. And so basically what we're doing is, remember, cube 1, every time it gets clicked on, it sends this play melody event, and that's what we're binding here. We're binding this play melody event to the melody volume of this meta sound, which is over here, melody volume, harmony volume. So every time that is clicked, it's going to set the melody to 0.5 or 0. 0.5 is where we want to hear it, 0 is off. And that's going to do that for each of the boxes. Icon 2, which is the bass, it's going to bind this event, play bass, and it's going to set the bass volume to 0.7 or 0. Again, all that's in the Metasound right here. There's bass volume, and then we got percussion volume as well. And so that's what that's doing every time we click on the box. We're turning it up, turning it back down. Now let's look at the MS sampler logic here. What this is doing is we're generating a sine wave melody and harmony. We're generating a kick drum rhythm, and we're generating a bass line. The way we're doing this is we have 2 Metasound patches. Again, I have a video on the difference between Metasound patches and Metasound sources. If you don't know what that is, you can go check that out. But basically, this is the Metasound patch synth, which is giving us a note array, a random note array from these selected notes that I've chosen, all the way from C up to an octave C. It is generating that. It is quantizing that to major scale, and it is sending that to the sine wave to this output called melody out, which is right here. So we got harmony out, melody out, and then trigger sine is the input. And so you see that right here. We got trigger sine is the input. And so we've got that right here. So every time trigger sine is cued, it starts the random float. Then the other thing we did for the harmony voice is after this note is generated, we branch this off when we come down here, and then we add 3 to that note. So if it's a 60, it's going to be a 63. And whatever that note number ends up being, it's adding 3 to it. Now we could also randomize this. We could randomize this so that it's adding between 3 and 5 to it, which is kind of cool. But this just adds 3 to it, still quantizing it to the major scale, and then it sends it out the other oscillator, which is harmony out, which goes right here, harmony out. Same thing for the bass synth, except you will notice on the harmony and melody, we have it up an octave, and on the bass synth, we have it down an octave. So that's triggering the bass. And then the only other thing we have is the Metasound patch sampler, which is basically a wave player that I created an input for a wave asset and an output for audio out. And so we can select what wave asset we have. Here it's the kick, and then the audio out goes to the mixer, and it gets mixed down. And that is pretty much it. I know there's a lot to it. It's a little complicated. Hit me up if you are trying to build this and you have questions or you're confused on anything. I did go through this pretty quick, but feel free to download the game. I got it linked. There's a Google Drive link down there. It's free. Open it up on your PC, play it. I guarantee you it will reduce your stress and calm you down. It's very soothing, very addictive, and I think you'll find yourself playing it a little bit longer than you think you will. Really fun game. Anyways, I hope this was an educational and inspiring tutorial. Please like and subscribe if you can. It helps out the channel a lot. YouTube loves those algorithms. Feel free to hit me up in the comments section as well, and thanks so much for checking out this video. We'll see you again real soon in our next video. Take care.